No, it is very bright with the flag instead of the curtain. Shall no, no, it's fine. Of course, I'm very well seen. Just gonna wait for a couple of minutes because I'm trying to check my stuff as people whisper in the background. Um, all right. Uh, Happy Sunday, everybody. As I usually try to do, I'm gonna start off with a little coffee fact. I don't think I talked about the alleged origin of coffee. There are a couple, kind of like how we have the how did the French side get to be bigger than the Dutch side myth story that we were all told in school. Coffee has a similar history. So essentially, um, wild coffee plants, were transported from Ethiopia, from Kaffa, to southern Arabia, and that there they were placed under cultivation around the 15th century. So the story of how it was discovered to be the substance that we all know and love today is that a goat herder noticed that when his flock ate the fruit of the plant, they went a little wild. And I guess he must have saw it and said, "Let me try to consume this also, this thing that my goats consume." And that led to this. Is that true? I don't know, but it also raises many questions because I always wonder like who looked at A and decided I'm going to do B to it first. But that's of course the joy of discovering the history of food, things, and drinks and such that we all like. I'm alone today. For now, I think I'm not sure. We'll see if anyone will join. It's not going to be too long today. I think just want to talk a bit about the last week, the meetings that we had, and next week we don't have any upcoming meetings because it is a preparation week of Parliament. But there's also a couple of meetings that I'll be requesting that I hope will be called within soonest. So last week we had. I want to start off with the town hall that we had, which was Tuesday actually. That was the electoral reform town hall that took place at the government building. The turnout was not that great, but I think from a promotional perspective, there was not much that was actually happening to kind of bolster attendance. But in any event, it was also live streamed, so that also I think helped with viewership. Although I did get complaints that the stream was up and down a bit. At the town hall, there was a panel of experts that provided their thoughts on what electoral reform could mean. There was Mr. Julio Romney, Dr. Anders Linda Richardson, Mr. Richard Gibson Sr., and Natalie Tackling from the Central Voting Bureau. And I think they kind of hit the nail on the head, which is something that we've always talked about as a party, which is that electoral reform does not necessarily mean taking a hatchet to the Constitution. It may not even mean legislation. It could mean expecting more and asking more from the political parties that ask you for their vote. Mrs. Richardson talked about, parties actually acting as parties, associations that are established, that have members, that have, rules, standards, etc., for who can be a member, who can be a candidate. They also talked about having your finances in order. They talked about, making sure that the people that you are welcoming into this realm are not at odds with your party's ideology and principles. That doesn't take away from the fact that human nature is human nature, and that further down the line, maybe where once we saw eye to eye, we no longer do, and it's really irreconcilable, and then people have to part ways because that's always a possibility as well. But overall, it was interesting to, I guess, receive as a party because I was there with the majority of my candidates. I think it was validation to kind of feel like, okay, well, we're doing things right then. We've, from the very beginning, put a huge emphasis on following our articles, on maintaining integrity within the party, maintaining that our members and candidates are in line with our principles and our values as as a political association, and just taking the steps to kind of keep that intact. And yeah, that there's always room for improvement, and also taking steps to ensure that financially the party is compliant. There is a law for the registration and financing of political parties. There are limits that you can get. There are limits to what companies or people can give you as a candidate and as a party. And I think it's important to keep that in mind as we move forward. So that was, I think, for me, the highlight then of the town hall. A lot of great discussion, a lot of discussion as well about vote buying, and corruption, and how parties have a role to play in that as well. Again, with the persons that they put on lists and in their membership. We said from the beginning, one of my talking points on this question of electoral reform during the campaign was you can't legislate character. Legislation is meant to guide how a process goes, but there are always going to be elements that don't adhere to it, and then that legislation also has to have the consequence for what happens when people don't adhere to that process. So I think that's it almost felt like we were back in campaign 2019, because a lot of what I was hearing is stuff that I also said, whether it was at leader debates or just in general to persons that would ask me, well, we got to get rid of this Article 59. And I'm like, why? That is the article in the Constitution that allows the Prime Minister to dissolve Parliament. Why would you get rid of that? That is meant to be a check and a balance, for government. In the event that you have a rogue Parliament that is acting outside of the best interest of the country and in a proven manner, you should absolutely be able to take that step. And P. Peterson has gone into it, countless times. He even went into it a bit at the town hall. And I think those remarks are also up on our YouTube page that you can browse and see for yourself what exactly we said at this town hall session. So, yeah, Patty. So that was the town hall. So back to the meeting schedule now. On the Wednesday, we had a continuation of a committee education meeting that was dealing with teachers, their vacation pay and their vacation schedule. It was just the minister returning to answer questions. None of my colleagues had follow-up questions, and I think if you watch that clip, it's kind of self-evident as to why not. And then we had the long-awaited Central Committee meeting on ENYA. So the Minister of Finance came in, gave us a update on the ENYA situation, mentioned, took questions as well from Parliament, and will return, I think, in our next meeting week for to update us. And I believe some persons were saying, well, he's going to come back after the deadline, but actually he mentioned in that meeting that the deadline had now been shifted to October 15th. So he'll be coming back not this coming week, but the week of the 9th. And yeah, here's hoping that there is some clarity with what happens. For those who did not get a chance to check out the meeting, my remarks are available online as well. Some of the questions that myself, MP Weaver, and MP Peterson asked in that meeting, because it is one that is concerning, and I'm always taken aback by how many people don't actually know what the ENYA saga is all about. And like I said when I was here with Nelly last time, I'm probably gonna have to take like a session to just kind of sit, possibly with MP Weaver, who also comes from that finance world, just like me, and kind of go over bit by bit the absolute confusion of the corporate structure alone that kind of allowed all of what has happened at ENYA to actually occur. So that meeting was not so it's not finished. We are adjourned, but definitely some of the questions that I asked, I think, to me at least, are worrisome. A few comments, of course, by some of our colleagues where they kind of tried to pin it on Dutch government that that they knew about it and so they didn't do anything. Yeah. So I just, again, as always, from since the start of my term in Parliament, I like to kind of give the private sector um, international finance take on these things. In a situation like ENYA, The Central Bank of Curacao and St. Martin is the regulator of the insurance companies and brokerages of Enya. The Central Bank of Curacao and St. Martin is who failed in their regulatory and fiduciary duty to the insurance companies and to the policyholders, in essence. And there is no supervision formally from the Dutch central bank, the Nederlandse Bank, the DNB, over the CBCS. So the extent that a financial institution resides in Curacao and St. Martin and are also active in the BES, that's when there's a sort of informal peak. They can raise alarms if they want. They can signal, throw up all the red flags they want, which some of my colleagues rightfully stated they did, even as far back as 2013 and then again in 2016. But they can't actually interfere. They can't intervene. So it was funny for me to hear something like the Dutch failed, the Nederlandse Bank failed, coming from the mouths of people who are very quick to say that the Dutch like to butt in where they're not needed and where they're not wanted. Okay, that's not even their role to butt in when it comes to the Central Bank of Curacao and St. Martin. So I that's why I had to make that point of, we had a member on the board of the Central Bank of St. Martin for 8 years. Somehow also received payouts that were in no way related to that role on the board of the central bank, but instead were related to work done for Enya or whatever child company they used to cover those payments and those invoices, if there are even invoices, to be honest. So I think it was important for me to make that statement to say, we have to get away from this shirking of our responsibility, because you can't ask for it and then say, well, no, that's not my fault, and you should have been paying better attention. No, we should have been paying better attention. The red flags were thrown up and nobody wanted to listen. And I always feel the need to tell people, it's the man politicians that saved the director of the central bank, that's now also embroiled in this whole bacchanal with payments that were not meant to be made, with illegal payments being received, and penthouses in Brickell Key, which so that Enya meeting took that turn, which of course is expected at this point. I'm pretty sure that the DNB, the Dutch government, etc., are to blame for even bad weather at this point for some of my colleagues. But while I, like to lay responsibility at the foot of where it belongs, in this instance, that's not where it belongs. In fact, if there were no policyholders, maybe like a small micro handful on probably Bonaire, I don't even think the DNB would have raised a red flag, because there's no need then for the informal supervision to take place. And I think that for me is what people should be focusing on. So in a sense, thank goodness that there were some Enya policyholders in Bonaire, so that it then made the informal supervisory a possibility of the DNB to at least kick up the red flags. So now we have that paper trail basically of these alerts and alarms that were sounded by others. But yeah, as I said, it is a real conundrum, and I think probably next week we'll take some time to go over it in earnest, because I know that it's now that the meeting has happened and persons have seen the clips and heard the questions that were asked by myself, by and Peter Weaver and MP Peterson. I think now the word is out that this is something that needs to be monitored by everybody on St. Martin, and not just those who have a direct monetary concern in it. In addition to that, there was a couple of statements, and I saw a very long article about a bank guarantee occurring for us in exchange, in lieu of a loan. So essentially, there was a statement made that the Dutch have signed a bank guarantee for investment into a geothermal plant, and so forth. And I found that a little odd. I'm not sure that a bank guarantee is possible by the DNB, because it's a central bank. Only we have had a very weird scenario where the central bank was guaranteed the loan related to the causeway, and I'll let you draw your conclusions about why that was. But no, so essentially, the Enya situation is not a situation of investment or economic uplift projections. It is a situation of a solvency issue that needs to be resolved. So I'm still have my team doing some research into it, so that we can be clear on the data and the possibilities. But from just a cursory set of questions posed to persons who have worked either with either our or other central banks, commercial banks in general, and any international aid and financing, for them, they found it a very odd suggestion, mainly because to save Enya is not an economic investment. So it's not something that would fly, but remains to be seen, because I think persons suggest whatever they see that kind of passes the buck down to someone else. And that's something that I ended my remarks with in that meeting. And after this, I'll move on. But taking responsibility, part of autonomy is being responsible. It's about making choices, and then you have to be held accountable for those choices. You have to be accountable for them in general. And I think, if we really sit and map out not just the parts of the Enya narrative, of the Enya issue that suit the narrative of some, in particular with regards to Mullet Bay, I think if we really sit down and map it out, we'll see that the failure rests right here. The failure rests in Curacao. And at the end of the day, when you have a central bank and you want to be considered a player on regional international field, and you want to be considered a country, then the buck stops with you. I think it was it Bush Senior who said that? The buck stops here. I'm not sure. We could always ask Ansari, since they're such good friends. And then on Thursday, we didn't have any meetings planned for that day. And then on Friday, there was a meeting, closed door, the Mullet Bay inquiry. Hopefully, they're hard at work on their report that was due June 23rd, 2023. So maybe by October 23rd, 2023, we'll have it so that we can see the grand solution and plan. But then we were meant to have a committee justice meeting. And that did not manifest, mainly because we didn't have quorum. In the committees, you can have a quorum based on factions, but the numbers that we had there, the persons that we had, the factions, did not amount to what we needed to have the meeting. I was there for the meeting. I'm not a member of that committee anymore. MP Peterson is. He had given notice of lateness in the early morning before the meeting was scheduled. The meeting was scheduled for 1 p.m. And then, it didn't happen. The meeting was meant to discuss 1 second. The draft national ordinances and decrees that are related to the legal position of police and the justice workers, and the sort of function book. And those calculations have been recognized for retroactive and future financial obligations to justice personnel, as well as an update regarding the draft criminal procedure code. Now, the first agenda point, the function book, long-suffering topic of debate and discussion. This Minister of Justice has brought it as far as I think anyone has, and I will, always commend her for that. But the meeting didn't happen primarily because the National Alliance faction was not there. One of them is traveling, that much I know. One was unable to attend with notice, I believe. And after the informal gathering was open to, then basically you have to open and then close the session because there's no quorum, but you have to inform the public of that reality. Like 10 minutes after that, then one of them showed up, which was a little curious to me. I was looking forward to the update on the function book. The ministers put out a press release, which of course has caused some buzz. And then we were supposed to have the update regarding the draft criminal procedure code. As everyone knows, this code is taking quite some time to be handled finally, officially then in Parliament, mainly because persons had a lot of concerns, as I spoke about over previous live streams, last week's live stream. The changes, we were meant to go over the changes that have been incorporated. There's also a report from the legal advisor that the Justice Ministry utilizes to let us know then, what, based on our analysis as Parliament versus what, is globally accepted in terms of definitions, for searches, etc. That all of that was meant to be discussed in this particular agenda point. The Criminal Procedure Code has a lot of CFATF recommendations that are in it that will help to regulate our anti-money laundering practices and what we do to prevent financial crime and how do we combat financial crime before, during, and after it has been committed. Um, so yeah, that is yet another meeting that will then have to be recalled so that we can get that update officially as Parliament from the Minister of Justice. So then that brings me to, well, now, over the week, there was a session held, I think it was the Thursday or Friday, I'm not sure, regarding the national health insurance, or the proposed national health insurance. And I think there are several concerns that have been coming our way from a variety of different stakeholders. And I think, one of my goals for this coming preparation week is to get some requests in for meetings with these stakeholders. The committees of Parliament are always there to investigate topics related to legislation. And since the Minister of VSA has confidently stated that the implementation for this ordinance is meant to roll out in January 2024, I think considering that we are in October and we also have a election coming up, that it's very good for us to kind of have those discussions now. Not that we've not asked them before, but I find it, a lot of times we ask, well, did you consult with stakeholders, in the community, et cetera? And it's always like, yes, of course we did. And the consultation was, nothing more than maybe a mere phone call, or it never happened at all. And I'm getting the distinct feeling that the stakeholder consultations were less of a consultation and more of a, this is what we're going to do. And I think, for me, it's important that people understand that there is a difference. Me consulting with you is, we sit down, we have a talk. Look, I think it should be this way. And then you say, I think it should be this way. And then we say, okay, well, can we meet here? And then this is the way that we go forward. Not saying that there aren't scenarios where there's so many different points of input and opinion that eventually someone just needs to make a decision. But that is what we talk about when we talk about consultation. To get to a decision, you have to consult. Having a meeting where you just kind of communicate, well, this is the way we're going to go. So suck it up, buttercup. That's informing. That's not consulting. So I think it's important to keep those definitions very much in mind when we talk about ordinances that are going to have wide sweeping changes. I still get complaints about the raise of the SZV wage cap, which is a law that I did not vote for because I did not think that the burden of proof had been met, so to speak, on the ZV fund being saved by adding more people to the ZV fund. So I think, something may look good on paper. It may look good to one person or one entity that may stand to benefit from it, but it doesn't mean that it's suitable for the whole. And you'll never be able to please everybody. But I think pleasing more than a handful of people or two handfuls is a lot. It's not the goal. It should be pleasing more than that. The wider population then. So one of the complaints I saw that the Windward Islands Teachers Union had put out a press release, some time ago when earlier in September, where they had basically highlighted their concerns that it seemed like they were going to be getting, less while paying more. And I believe it goes back to something that a discussion that I had when I first moved back home. And what a discussion we've even had in Parliament, like off the camera. People compare the Friendside to the Friendside Health and their insurance schemes to ours all the time. When something happens to you on the Friendside, like that with your French ID, your carte vitale, you get done what you need to get done. But the collectivité, Martinique, Guadeloupe, etc., that carte vitale is backed by the tax-paying persons, the millions, over 40 million people in France. Because insurance is a game about numbers, much like pensions, actually. And I think, we had our activities and research arm, Projects of Progress, had a pension event with Guardian Group not too long ago, and the persons that were in there were stunned at the things about pensions that they learned that they did not ever know about. And I think it's important, especially our generation, to start to pay better attention to this. If I really um, have to map it out and age myself here, in another 28, 25 years, 28 years, could be 30 years, that's retirement age for me. And when people talk about, well, retirement age just keeps going up, it keeps going up because there's less people paying in and more people taking out of the fund. So you have to keep persons in there paying in. It's an uncomfortable thing to say, and it's a uncomfortable discussion to have, but that's the reality of pensions, and that's the reality of insurance. Insurance is about numbers. The more persons that are paying into a scheme, the more you can give out of the scheme. Right now, we have a lot that are, they're trying to add more to pay in, but will it ever be enough? I think is my question. When national health insurance first came out, it sounded very much like universal healthcare. So kind of like the Netherlands, kind of like some of the Scandinavian countries, France, etc. But again, that is something that is possible based on the population that is contributing officially and the investments made by those schemes and by those companies elsewhere. So it's something that has our attention. We've not officially been able to go over it and handle it in Parliament. So I think, as in the coming weeks at least, I do want to invite, and of course, as always, if stakeholders want to have discussions in private, that's entirely possible as well. I'm always open to it. We as a faction, as a party, are always open to it. And it's not about getting information to kind of play this political gotcha game, but it's because we firmly believe that you have to consult. This business of informing, and even we technically as Parliament have been informed. It will go into implementation January 24th, and I'm like, that's curious because I haven't even voted. So that is the surety then that is kind of projected onto the population. So I'm not sure, mate. I don't really know how it's gonna play out, but I think just kind of rushing it through, you are setting up generations to come for problematic scenarios when it comes to their healthcare. And it also goes back to what kind of healthcare are we aiming to even receive. So yeah, so that's something that's going to be left up for debate. Um, Last time we briefly talked about the taxi license scenario, and now there's been a couple of rumors reaching us, and I think eventually MP De Weaver might jump on it to talk about the rumor going around that there's been a lift on I think it was car rentals, but also on online gambling, licenses that are being handed out, which is curious because that's not a license category that the minister mentioned when we pressed him about these questions shortly after he was inaugurated. And I know that the answers that probably MP De Weaver would get if she were to ask questions about this, or even if I were to ask questions, or even MP Pantoflet, because all of us have talked about the fact that gambling is out of control on the island. There are more booths that are popping up. There's still no word on the gaming control board, which most countries have put in place already. And I want to make that abundantly clear. There is no thing when you see Las Vegas, when you see wherever, there is control there. Um, Online gambling licenses, though, it goes into new territory, and it reminds me of what I said regarding spatial development and continuing with big commercial construction projects. You're painting the house while the house is still under construction. Something somewhere has to pause while you get your house in order. Your house in order in this instance is a gaming control board that addresses the fact that you do have persons that are addicted to gambling here, and that it is actually a disease that has to be treated like any other addiction. I've heard this from Turning Point because there's always a combination of gambling and substance abuse. I've heard it from Mental Health Foundation. So it is there, and it's time we start to talk about it and approach it in a realistic and responsible manner with how we're going to combat this in our society. And one of those ways is to just hit the pause button and maybe take stock of the environment that you've built. Somebody remarked to me that in Anguilla, on every square mile, you could find a church. Here, on every square mile, you could find a lottery booth or a casino. And I think, it's time that we really take a stand and say, this is not the way that we want to continue to move forward. And it is possible. Um, so yeah, so next week, just sending in a bunch of requests. Of course, you guys can stay tuned to the WhatsApp community group for questions that we've asked or things that we've put out or plan to put out, meetings that we've requested, and we will see how the requests then for those stakeholder consultations for the national health insurance go. Of course, if you are a stakeholder, it kind of feels like a Sally Struthers commercial. If you are a stakeholder and you want to speak in private, don't hesitate to reach out either via our WhatsApp community or info@pfp.sx, or my email address at Parliament, which is just my first name dot last name at essexandparliament.org. Always willing to listen to persons concerned in the community. My inbox is always open for that, because we still believe that, it's through people and the partnership with the people that things can move forward. Not by telling you what's going to happen, but by consulting with you every step of the way. So thank you for tuning in this time. Next week as well, we'll be back. And I think that will be the big kind of finance industry Enya corporate structure fiasco session that we kind of delve deep into that and try to answer any questions as well. So feel free to send those in, and we'll get to them during that live. So have a wonderful rest of the Sunday and see you next week.